In a previous video, we discussed the emergence of the revisionist school of Islamic study, a school of thought suggesting alternative explanations about the early history of Islam that deviated from the traditional narrative of the faith's origin in Arabia and with the Prophet Muhammad. In that video, we explored revisionist theories about how Islam emerged in places other than Arabia and generations after the time when Muhammad was said to have lived. In this video, we're going to explore two other revisionist theories. One of these postulates that the holiest city in Islam has not always been Mecca, but was instead Petra, an ancient pre-Islamic Arabian city in modern-day Jordan. The other claim is that the Quran was not codified during the rule of the third Caliph Uthman, as is claimed, but decades, if not centuries later, during Umayyad or even Abbasid rule. Join us today as we discuss these two theories together, weighing the evidence both for and against them, as we examine the early history of the world's second largest religion under a critical lens. First though, here's another method of seeing things from another perspective that's handy day to day. It's via our sponsor, NordVPN. With NordVPN, you can access the internet from all across the world, and you'll find things do look different from a new IP. In particular, loads of content hosting services only show their content to chosen countries, for all kinds of reasons. So if you want to see the true library of your streaming services or game stores, use Nord to teleport across the world in one click and get the extra stuff for free. A single click is all it takes, and it's the same deal with security for all your devices thanks to Nord's Threat Protection Pro features. They automatically block malware, phishing links, advertisement, web trackers, and fake online stores. It's an all-in-one solution for up to 10 devices with 24/7 support and constant updates. NordVPN doesn't track your activity and prevents anyone else doing so via encryption, so you'll be well equipped for facing the threats lurking online, especially on public networks where things can be particularly risky. Try it out today with 4 months of extra coverage added for free to a 2-year plan when you sign up at nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. They offer a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk in giving it a go. That's nordvpn.com/kingsandgenerals. We will begin our discourse today with a discussion on the Qibla, which is the direction that Muslims are supposed to face when praying. For centuries, Muslims have been turning towards the direction of Mecca when conducting namaz. Thus, Mecca is the Qibla of Muslims. But has this always been the case? The traditional perspective believes that Muslims initially prayed while facing Jerusalem, before the Prophet and the Quran told them to face Mecca instead. However, revisionists offer a more intricate scenario. Dan Gibson argues that the only evidence that Muslims ever prayed while facing Jerusalem before changing their Qibla to Mecca comes from the writings of Muslim scholar al-Bukhari, who lived 200 years after the emergence of Islam. Traditionalist historians cite the verse of the Quran, which instructs Muslims to change their Qibla to Masjid al-Haram. But this verse does not specify where this masjid, meaning mosque, actually is, nor does it specifically mention Mecca or the Kaaba. Gibson claims that there was not a single mosque in the first 100 years of Islam which faced Mecca. According to him, one of the earliest mosques faced either Jerusalem or Petra. This mosque was known as the Masjid al-Qiblatain, or Mosque of the Two Qiblas, and was built as early as 626. Additionally, the Qibla of the Great Mosque of Baalek in Lebanon, constructed roughly in the year 700, appears to more closely face the city of Petra than Mecca. Gibson insists that there was not a single mosque constructed up until the year 727 that faced Mecca. Other revisionists point out that some hadiths refer to Mecca as a place with a favourable climate and bountiful provision of fruits and cattle. They argue that Petra's climate is more in line with the description of the foundational city of Islam, as Mecca is not really known for a climate favourable for cultivation and does not have much vegetation. Some revisionist authors go even further, arguing that Mecca did not exist at the time or was a minor and unimportant place in Arabia. Petra, on the other hand, was already an ancient and wealthy city by the 7th century AD. During the time of Alexander the Great, it was the capital of the Nabatean Kingdom, a wealthy Arab nation that grew powerful from its control over regional trade routes. Thus, it ostensibly makes sense why Petra rather than Mecca would have been the original center of a religion founded by the Arab peoples. Traditionalists pose several convincing counterarguments to refute this theory. According to historian David A. King, the first generations of Muslims had no means whatsoever for accurately finding the direction of either Petra or Mecca to within a degree or two, not least because they had no access to any geographical coordinates, let alone modern ones, and no mathematics whatsoever. Indeed, it would be difficult for builders in Hejaz to identify a small angle difference between Jerusalem and Petra. It must be remembered that the Islamic Golden Age, the period of the renaissance of science, mathematics, engineering, and other disciplines in the Muslim world, came much later, sometime in the late 8th century. It is plausible to believe that in the early years of Islam, the builders of mosques simply lacked the necessary skills and tools to be precise in their calculations. While this counterargument is technically speculation as well, there are several other legitimate counterarguments to the Petra theory. Let's look at the claim of revisionists about inconsistencies in the climate of Mecca with its description in hadiths. First of all, many hadiths glorify different important aspects of Islam, including Mecca, Muhammad, and some of the caliphs. However, not all hadiths should be taken at face value. Furthermore, traditionalists argue that when Mecca is referred to as an agrarian paradise, this may be a reference to a general Mecca region, particularly the place called Taif, which is 87 kilometers away from the city of Mecca and famous for its grapes, figs, and pomegranates. There is also a Quranic verse saying, "Our Lord, I have settled some of my descendants in an uncultivated valley near your sacred house, our Lord, that they may establish prayer. So make hearts among the people inclined toward them, and provide for them from the fruits, that they might be grateful." Mecca is indeed situated in a narrow valley, and its climate does not really allow for cultivation. Another critical argument disqualifying Petra is related to the concept of idol worshipping. There are many stories of Muhammad prohibiting idolatry, fighting Arab idol worshippers, and destroying statues and symbols of gods worshipped by different pre-Islamic Arab tribes. During the emergence of Islam, Petra was ruled by the Byzantine Empire, a Christian regime, which, much like the Muslims, would also have prohibited pagan idol worshipping. Therefore, Petra does not make sense as the city of the foundation of Islam. Let us next address the theory that Mecca was either insignificant or did not exist at all in the time of Islam's founding. Indeed, one may claim that there is no reference to Mecca in pre-Islamic sources, or that the ones claimed by traditionalist historians are not convincing. Let's look at the latter references and discuss if they are related to Mecca. The first source is the Bibliotheca Historica, written by the Greek historian Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BCE. It mentions a temple which is very holy and exceedingly revered by all Arabians. Some claim that this is a reference to the Kaaba, but the problem is that the region Diodorus describes this place being in resembles northwest Arabia, not the Hejaz. So this is an inconclusive reference at best. In the 2nd century CE, Ptolemy listed the names of 50 cities in Arabia. One of them is Makaraba, and the similarity with the name Mecca is telling, but again not entirely conclusive. The Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus, writing in the 4th century CE, mentions a city in western Arabia named Hierapolis, which means holy city, and some scholars argue that this is a reference to the Kaaba as well. 5th century Greek sources mention the tribe of the Goromeni ruling over eastern Arabia. This tribe is known as the Juhum in Arabic. Several pre-Islamic Arab poets write about Mecca in connection with the Jurhum. The 6th century poet Zuhair ibn Abi Sulma wrote in one of his poems, "I swear by the house around which walked the men who built it, belonging to Quraysh and Jurhum." Thus it can be confirmed that Greek sources mention the Jurhum tribe in eastern Arabia, while pre-Islamic Arab poets write about a sacred house that belonged to this tribe. One may say that a poem is a dubious historical source at best. Still, when you connect the dots, it is easy to see an apparent reference to Mecca and the Kaaba existing in the historical record prior to the emergence of Islam. There is more evidence pointing to Mecca as the place of emergence of Islam. Even though the Saudi government prohibits archaeological excavations, many rock inscriptions near Mecca point to the connection between Islam and this city. 2 inscriptions are particularly interesting to us. One of them is near Taif, dated to 697–8 CE, a few decades after the death of Muhammad. It mentions the reconstruction of the Masjid al-Haram in Mecca and the testimony of recognition of a single god and Muhammad as his messenger. Another one is found near Mecca and is dated to 703–704 CE. This inscription includes a mixture of the Quranic verses. These are some of the inscriptions from the very early period of Islam. They were found very close to Mecca. The dating and geographical proximity show a connection between Islam and Mecca. Another critical issue of contention between traditionalist and revisionist scholars is related to the codification of the Quran. Traditionalists argue that the Quran we have now was finalized during the reign of the 3rd Rashidun Caliph Uthman, who was a close personal friend of the Prophet Muhammad and reigned between 644 and 656 AD. There is also a school of thought arguing that this occurred during the reign of Abu Bakr, the 1st Rashidun Caliph, who came to power directly after Muhammad's death. The historian John Burton goes even further. proposing that the Quran was codified when Muhammad was still alive. One of the arguments for this lies in Muslim sources, which write that the Prophet's companions complain about missing verses. Burton postulates that if the companions had indeed been discussing the missing verses, it means that the Quran was being compiled or had already been compiled during Muhammad's lifetime. Critics argue that it may simply have been evidence of some of the verses of the Quran being written when Muhammad was alive, but it does not prove that the Quran as we know it was codified in that period. Revisionists, on the other hand, claim that the Quran as we know it was only standardized many decades after Muhammad's death, when the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik was in power. John Wansborough goes even further, stating that the Quran was standardized sometime in the 9th century during the Abbasid Caliphate, 2 centuries after the time of Muhammad. The revisionists argue that there are several points of critique. One of them, Chase Robinson, does not find it believable that Uthman's political power was sufficient to evolve the Quran from individual lines scribbled on camel shoulder blades and rocks to complete, single, fixed and authoritative text on papyrus or vellum. In comparison, Abd al-Malik became the caliph during a time when all the necessary instruments of coercion were in place, and he had sufficient power and motivation to impose the standardized version of the Quran on the Ummah. According to Robinson's theory, before that, the Quran's text remained fluid and non-standardized. Other revisionists argue that the process of standardization started during the lifetime of Muhammad, but took decades before this work was completed with the final touches, which happened during the reign of Abd al-Malik. However, an analysis of early Quranic manuscripts refutes the theory of late standardization of Islam's holy book. The radiocarbon analysis of the Quranic manuscript kept in the Birmingham University Library indicates a 95% probability of it being written between 568 and 645. The linguist Moraine van Putten asserts that this manuscript most likely came from the Uthmanic period and possesses the overall clear and consistent unity of the Uthmanic text type. He adds that the early Quranic manuscripts point to a single written archetype, which was copied from one mushaf to the other through copying from a written exemplar, with mushaf being a term referring to a written copy of the Quran. Another argument against the revisionist late codification theory is that there are no explicit references to the period after Muhammad's death. It is plausible to argue that had there been an attempt at a fabrication, the rulers of their time would have liked to have their names included in the holy book. Another factor to consider here is the text of the Quran itself and some of its verses. There are passages in which Allah basically instructs the Prophet to do better. For instance, the verse about the blind man talks about Muhammad turning away from the blind man and ignoring him. Another verse discusses the story of accusations of adultery against Aisha, Muhammad's wife. Although both of these stories are used to offer guidance to the Ummah, we should not forget that the Prophet Muhammad is a revered figure in Islam. It is not implausible to think that the late-era codifiers of the Quran could have contemplated omitting such verses in order to avoid any controversial stories about the Prophet. Generally speaking, revisionist historians pose some interesting questions about the historicity of the traditional narratives regarding the emergence of Islam. However, they often rely on a scattered and incomplete corpus of evidence to make their points. They have been accused of proposing radical theories based on insufficient evidence, while ignoring other evidence refuting their theories. For this reason, many revisionist theories have been accused of propagating conspiracy theories with ulterior motives. We do not intend to project our own views and conclusions regarding this contentious matter on our viewers. Thus, we have presented both sides of the debate as impartially as possible. You be the judge. More videos on the historicity of world religions are on the way. To ensure you don't miss them, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.